Friends, I can't wait to see you at the festival. Of course, we'll go step by step and feel where we are. But as of today, we're praying for a deep transformation in the medical reality, for a vaccine, for a deployment of the vaccine, for a lifting of the lockdowns, and to be ready to come together in the most serious and beautiful and deep way of outrageous love, of celebration, and even possibly of mourning, but to come together in the most profound and potent and poignant and powerful way we can this summer to take the next step in weaving the new story. And it's more important now than ever. What's the worst possible thing that a human being could do after the coronavirus? You know what that would be? To return to business as usual, right? To waste this unbearably painful gift in which we're experiencing the unbearable intimacy of all human beings on the planet. And to miss the invitation, to miss the opening, right? To miss the possibility, to miss the evolutionary impulse, inviting us to transmute, to transform, to be deeper, to love more, to love wider, to transform our identities, and just to revert to who we were before the coronavirus, that is absolutely tragic. So I want to invite you, I want to invite myself, I want to invite our community, which is committed to participating in the evolution of love. Our community that's committed to playing a larger game. To remember again, Da Vinci. Da Vinci and Florence in the Renaissance just confronted a plague. He just confronted the coronavirus of the Middle Ages, which was deadly beyond imagination in Europe. Some people say a quarter, other statistics up to half, right, of Europeans may have been killed. Right? The ravaging effects are beyond imagination. And remember, this is all before there's any genuine sense of modern medicine. And Da Vinci understands that he can't enter every village that's been ravaged by the Black Death. That the only way to respond to the pandemic is to experience it as an invitation to the evolution of consciousness, to the evolution of love. And the deepest expression of the evolution of love is to tell a new story of identity, a new universe story, a new story of pleasure, a new story of celebration, a new story of honor, a new story of nobility, a new story of desire, a new story of the relationship between the infinite and finitude, between spirit and human beings. And Da Vinci gathered with probably not more than 1,000 people, according to Paul Tillich, the great philosopher. Not more than 1,000 people were really involved in the Renaissance, but they came together and they responded to the Black Death. They responded to the pandemic. They responded to the plague by raising all boats, by telling a new story. Friends, we are at precisely that moment in history. We're at a time between worlds. The time is not in this particular recording, but in more depth, we could actually show the precise and potent structural analogies between the Renaissance and now. It's a time between worlds. It was then a time between worlds. It's a time between stories. It was then a time between stories. In the Renaissance, it was when the traditional classical religious story, for all of its beauty, was shown to be limited and overreaching, and also the source of enormous cruelty in its shadow expressions. but it was before the story of universal human rights, of the modern scientific method, right, had emerged. It was a time between worlds, a time between stories. That was the Renaissance, and Da Vinci speaks into that, and they tell the story of modernity. We're now, again, at a time between worlds. Pre-modernity, the traditional stories, which have been freeze-framed by fundamentalism, don't actually speak to us. These are not stories that are equal to our power or equal to our experience of ourselves. But the modern story, which is just about the separate self, about the human being in this very limited identity as this monadic, skin-encapsulated ego, separate self, who is dominated by the drive to success, the success story, and has a little pleasure from his, personal romantic story, and goes in a very personal hero's journey, but is not backed by the universe. Right? The modern stories don't have the backing of the universe. They're not aligned with the larger impulses of reality. And postmodernity came and worked to explode both the modern and pre-modern stories. And postmodernity says there is no story. It's all purposeless. It's all meaninglessness. But of course, we know that's not true. We can feel meaning in our bodies. That's why postmodernity got rejected all around the world, because you can actually go inside and know that it matters. It matters if I love, and it matters how I love, and it matters if I'm in integrity, and it matters if I find my honor, and it matters if I give my gift. We know it matters. So we need a new story. And so the plague comes again. Now, I'm not in any way suggesting that the plague came in order to provoke us into the new story. The plague came because the plague came. There are objective reasons. It was born in Wuhan, China, in a place where we split off from our own sense of identity and intimacy, a very poor population. And that poor population had to eat. And so they brutalized animals who suffered immeasurably, slaughtered without any kind of compassion in open markets, animals half dead, sold, unsanitized, eaten. It was a disaster. Go online and see clips of the Wuhan market before coronavirus. And out of that failure of intimacy, out of that splitting off of the poor and destitute, and splitting off of the experience of an animal who suffers immeasurably, was born the virus. And that moment is a symptom of this larger global intimacy disorder. And the larger global intimacy disorder is creating, not only did it create the catastrophic risk, right, which is this pandemic. Catastrophe means millions of people could be killed. That's a catastrophic risk. But that global intimacy disorder, which is driven by a win-lose metrics, a success story, because we don't have any other story, or a very narrow me and that one person in the world romantic story, because we don't have a larger story of love. We don't have a larger universe story, a larger narrative of identity, a larger narrative of desire, right? A narrative of community. Right? Our frameworks have failed us. So in that failure of frameworks, we have a global intimacy disorder. We have nations colliding at different levels of consciousness. We have separate self-human beings in their win-lose metrics, success story-driven life. And all of a sudden, there's a pandemic. And yes, we got to deal with the pandemic in every possible way, of course, but we got to go deeper. What's the invitation here? How do we turn fate into destiny? And the invitation is the Da Vinci invitation. We've got to tell a story, a new story of intimacy. This pandemic was born through one of the many, many manifestations of the global intimacy disorder. This pandemic was born through one of the many, many manifestations of the global intimacy disorder, the Wuhan market in China. Wow. And we put a clip of the Wuhan market in this mailing, just so you can look at it yourself. A little bit shocking. That birthed the pandemic. But of course, that's just one example of multitudes of examples around the world where we split off suffering. We split off the other. We can't do that anymore. We're in a new reality. We're in a reality in which we're actually a global community and we're bumping into each other all the time. You might have noticed that there are no boundaries that contain the pandemic, the virus. This is no boundary consciousness. It's communicated through all forms of touch, through all surfaces that have been touched. And what it's saying is, friends, you're all connected. You're all intimately connected. No one can split off from anyone else. So the healing of this virus, this contagion of deadliness, is actually to evolve to life, to new life and to new aliveness. Not just a restoration of intimacy, but an evolution of intimacy, a realization of a new story that holds us all together in intimate coherence. A new story in which every person has a place, which every person has the infinite pleasure of giving their gift, of living their life, of writing their poems, singing their song, being the gorgeous, unique expression of reality that is you, and through the quivering of your uniqueness, to feel all the puzzle pieces who are equally unique around you, to feel the larger puzzle, to feel the entire frame, to feel the world, to become intimate with all of reality. Not just intimate with your survival people, not just intimate with your tribe, not just intimate with human beings, intimate with the entire world, with the animals in the Wuhan market, with human beings around the planet, with the parts of myself that I've split off. This is an invitation to the evolution of intimacy. And one of the primary guides to deeper intimacy, to a new world story, to a new narrative of identity, is paradoxically pleasure. Pleasure, knowing what truly gives me pleasure, is itself one of the great sources of wisdom. You see, pleasure itself is the source of all ethics. And being able to discern between the voices of pleasure that live in us, between and to understand, to grok, that's an English word, to grok, to really means to really grasp, G-R-O-K, right? To grok the principles that guide pleasure, to understand the different levels of pleasure. Right? That's the beginning of creating a new shared world narrative. Pleasure is not owned by the Chinese or by the Americans. There are no foreign viruses. There are no foreign countries. We're all located in the unique place that we live. It might be our unique religion. It might be our unique country. It might be our unique family. But our uniqueness is the currency of connection. We're all part of the larger puzzle. And that which we all share is this enormous allurement to pleasure. How do we distinguish between pseudo-pleasure and real pleasure? We think that pleasure and ethics are the opposite. They're not. Pleasure is the source of all ethos. What a wildly beautiful idea. So we're going to come together. We're going to come together with a fierce commitment. And that is, we're not going to be the same people after our experience of Corona that we were before. There's nothing more tragic than to waste a tragedy. When we waste a death, we kill the person again. Right? We're coming face to face with death, with our fear of death. The skull grins at the banquet. People have already died. More people will. Friends, let's turn this moment of fate into an invitation to a destiny of unimaginable beauty, unimaginable truth, unimaginable goodness, unimaginable pleasure. We're going to cry. We're going to laugh. We're going to do them together. We're going to be more than we ever dreamed possible. So I'm going to be sending you videos regularly and talking. We're going to be in conversation all through. And Clarence Schott might share with you perhaps the clip that we did in our One Church, Many Paths, One Mountain, which is a weekly program we have. And it's not about church or synagogue or secular humanism. It's just a place we get together, which Barbara Marx Hubbard and myself began. And so we might send you a clip from there, right, as we talk about the virus and as we talk about what it means to be in this moment. But we'll share with you. We'll be talking to you. Clarence Schott will be talking. I'll be sharing with you, right? Feel free. There'll be an email right at the bottom of Clarence Schott's letter which is where you can write in questions. And whenever I do videos with Claire and Shahat, right, I'll be answering whatever questions you send in. I'll be delighted to answer. And so you can get to know me better. I can get to know you better. We can feel each other more. This is a moment to tremble before Spirit, tremble with responsibility, tremble with audacity. Make friends with the fear. Don't push it aside. Make friends with it. But then get beneath the fear and feel the invitation. I'll close with one very simple knowing of the great interior scientists. The word fear in the original Hebrew, yirah, also means expanded consciousness. You ever go to a horror movie? I went once. I ran out screaming after 15 minutes. But why do people go to horror movies, right? You go to horror movies because you feel alive. Fear creates aliveness. Make friends with the fear. Don't let it crush your living force. Let it invite your new aliveness. Let's hold hands together and let's walk through. Right? Better, more noble, more beautiful than we ever have before. Thank you so much.